You've been now to the Great Britain and you had a big event. Did you hear or did you tell the participants of this big event something really new and sensational?
What I spoke of recently in Watford, United Kingdom, it's really the first time I've given an extensive lecture since the election of last year, was about the 4-year effort to bring the disclosure issue, which is the formal acknowledgement of the extraterrestrial presence by heads of state of nations, into the political election. And we succeeded in a very big way. An unprecedented political coverage took place. And this was because of a connection between the leading candidate to be president, Secretary Hillary Clinton, and the extraterrestrial issue, which went all the way back to her husband's administration, from when President Bill Clinton was in office, and this took place between 93 and 96. It's called the Rockefeller Initiative, and it was an effort by a billionaire, Lawrence Rockefeller, to convince and encourage President Clinton to release all of the files, the UFO files, right, to the public and grant amnesty to witnesses that might come forward from the military and intelligence sector. This would have ended the truth embargo, which is the embargo the United States has had in place on this issue since the late 1940s, shortly after the Cold War ended. Now, the reason that Rockefeller approached the administration was precisely because the Cold War had ended. And it was time, a lot of people felt, for the world to know the truth, that we're not alone in the universe by any means, and we're being engaged by multiple species. And the government's known about it for 70 years, possibly more. It's a big deal. But unfortunately, the politics of the time and certain problems we have in the United States with respect to the relationship between the military and intelligence complex, which is now vast in size, and the president and the White House, the executive branch. It didn't happen. Now, the people in the Clinton administration who were involved in this effort, which included, of course, First Lady Hillary Clinton, President Bill Clinton, top advisor John Podesta, advisor George Stephanopoulos, Chief of Staff Leon Panetta, Chief of Staff Mike McClarty, Vice President Al Gore, Secretary of Energy Bill Richardson, and others. All of these Clinton people, I guess you could say, all had political aspirations. Al Gore went to run for president. Bill Richardson ran for president. And of course, Secretary Clinton ran for president. And so they made the decision that they would not talk about this again until one of them won the White House. So for the next 23 years, the Clintons never spoke about this 3-year effort to end this embargo and bring this truth to the world's people. And one of the reasons they didn't talk about it is because, like President Carter, when President Clinton went to get information from the military intelligence complex, he hit a stone wall, meaning you can't have that. And that is a huge problem, because that's illegal. That's a constitutional breach. The military and intelligence structures in the United States serve the president. The president is the commander-in-chief, which I believe is the same in Russia, pretty sure. And the president can declassify anything that he wants. He should be able to visit any facility, any program. But what has happened is that has been pulled out from under the White House and the Congress, so that many, many programs are operating in what is called deep, deep black. Only the people in the program know about them. This is a constitutional breach, and he ran up against it, Carter ran up against it, and President Barack Obama ran up against it. And so that was a huge problem. And so they decided, we can't deal with that. And they kept silent for 23 years. But what happened is that the advocacy movement, of which I've been a part, caught up with the Clintons in late 2014, rather. At this point, she had just started running her second campaign, which lasted 2 years and cost $1 billion. And Paradigm Research Group succeeded in getting the media to engage this subject, the subject of the extraterrestrial presence and its connection to the leading candidate to be president. And one of the principal reasons that was happening is that Paradigm Research Group, my group, organization, in 2013 conducted a mock congressional hearing, the citizen hearing on disclosure. It cost a great deal of money, $750,000. We had 6 former members of the United States Congress who heard testimony from 42 witnesses, 30 hours over 5 days. We filmed it all. And it was very significant, very powerful. Then, in 2014, we shipped that testimony to the U.S. Congress. All 435 House members, 100 senators. And there was 2 hours of testimony in that footage of the Rockefeller initiative, the Clinton ED connection, and they knew that was going to the Hill. I then came to Washington in late November. I started approaching the Congress to have meetings with staffers. I had several dozen. And then my public relations person was approaching the media. And we broke through in late November. And what happened? From late November of 2014 through basically the election of 2016, 2 years, 500 articles were written in mainstream press, English language, about Clinton ET connection, with, of course, on the online version of these articles, links to documents and interviews and so forth, and evidence. 500 mainstream articles. New York Times, Washington Post, Washington Times, Times of London, Chicago Tribune, and on and on. And another many hundreds in foreign language press. So that this issue was starting to build to the point where it could explode. And the goal of this program was to have this issue explode and the media go into what we call in America frenzy mode, or Monica Lewinsky mode, where they're on fire and they have 1,000 questions. And when that happens, they would be going at the Pentagon and the White House with all of these questions, and the Pentagon and the White House would realize it's over. And that breach, that constitutional breach, which has been in place since the 1960s, would have to be temporarily closed, where the Pentagon and the White House would cut a deal that would satisfy each party so that the president could go before the American people in the East Room of the White House and announce that we have an extraterrestrial presence. We could not tell you before, but we can tell you now. That was the game plan, and it was moving forward very well. And the only reason that this did not explode before the election, which would have made Barack Obama the disclosure president, the first head of state to announce this extraterrestrial presence and gain one of the greatest political legacies in history, was that our television news host, who control the presidential debates in America, they have exclusive rights to ask the questions. They failed us. 30-some debates and forums, 25, 6 candidates, went on for months. And in spite of hundreds of articles around the world about the connection between the leading presidential candidate and the extraterrestrial issue, not a single question was asked of any one of those candidates. And as a result, the Clinton team, which had already publicly addressed the issue out of necessity because they were under so much pressure, 12 times, stopped talking on June the 2nd, thinking that they were going to make it to the election, win the election. Secretary Clinton would then take the White House on January the 20th, and she was going to be the disclosure president, getting the legacy that her husband was denied 23 years before. And then lightning struck. She lost. And this process, or this advocacy thread, was cut. However, the the number of articles that were printed, when you look at the amount of page views, what we call internet page views, which combined between the UK and the United States is 100 billion a year in the venues that were writing articles about this, it's likely over 1 billion people now in the world know something about this Clinton connection. And so what I explained at this conference just a few days ago, and what I'm explaining right now to the Russian people, is that after 70 years, the United States came this close to being in a position where its president was going to have to announce the extraterrestrial presence either before that last election or after the inauguration of Secretary Clinton. That close. Now let me be clear. The announcement of the extraterrestrial presence will be one of the most profound events in human history. The head of state that is the first to do it will achieve one of the greatest legacies in history. And we will then be in the what we call post-disclosure world. This is big. It's almost too big to describe how significant this is. And we came that close.